allegedly, on July 7th of 2020, there was a settling of a municipal bond here in Dallas. There was also a municipal bond issued around the same time for Detroit, Michigan, or for Michigan, which is very concerning to me because the chief of police in Dallas right now is from Detroit. Um, and I've already reported, including publicly, about how I believe that there was fraud involved in this bond issue while it was actually being sold. And the 17th will be 10 days after, presumably, it was settled, which has a very significant matter. Also, if nothing else, happens to be the last day of this alleged tech camp here in Dallas that supposedly is doing something involving eighth grade girls. It's for reasons like these that I have said that these municipal bond offerings are engaged under fraudulent pretenses. And it still doesn't address the fact that what I had done in August of 2017, before Hurricane Harvey, was try to file a filing with the Supreme Court of Texas challenging the alleged flood mitigation plan in the city of Houston, while there were still tens of millions of dollars in outstanding housing bonds that had not been delivered to the city. And after, or that had not been acted on by the city. There was a report in the Houston Chronicle concerning allegations from various organizations in Houston that a $53 million housing bond, municipal housing bond, had been issued in Houston, and that more than $30 million of it had not been used at that time while the city was in the course of trying to get other plans approved. And it happened to come out at the same time that there had been fraud involved in misrepresenting the reporting of numbers on the municipal bond by the mayor earlier, which was using the fire department's lawsuit as a derivative, and also in the course of the city announcing that it had some new flood mitigation plan. So I filed a filing with concern that the city was misrepresenting the financial needs associated with that. Now, Hurricane Harvey happened, and there was all of this fraudulent reporting of what actually happened as part of Hurricane Harvey. And over 2 years later, in 2008, or a year later in 2018, I had to refile with the Supreme Court of Texas because $5 billion in HUD funding had been delivered to Houston, ostensibly to assist with the damage from Hurricane Harvey. While I've been trying for over a year to get somebody to acknowledge that there was tons of fraud involved after Hurricane Harvey. And part of the fraud involved is what I alleged was subjecting people to illegal processes and inhumane processes connected to the use of non-destructive testing technologies that I believed were actually happening to people as part of the alleged result. And there are harrowing implications of what that means. I've reported on that elsewhere. But part of what it's meant, insofar as I understand, is is directly connected to what's going on now. And I bring this up because I'm trying to respond appropriately. Apparently, today is the 14th day after a dismissal order that was issued in a case concerning various gas and oil companies that were being sued by municipalities in Northern California. I've been tracking something similar in Delaware, where there were jurisdictional issues. Was it federal jurisdiction, or did a state have a right to do it independently? Now, over a year later, and let me tell you, I witnessed that what they did to the Attorney General's office of I'm sorry, it was Rhode Island. The Attorney General's office of Rhode Island at that time was horrible. It was absolutely excruciating what was going on as part of that case. I personally witnessed it, and I was more than once subjected to what I understood to be retaliation just for pursuing the case and acknowledging the case. It was horrible and very, very painful, and could potentially, and it was actually lethal. So when these states and when these cities try to square off against these gas and oil companies, the question becomes, well, what is the terms? And so if they're not addressing, other things that are going on, then this could potentially expose their constituents to risk that they're not willing to actually take responsibility for. And so, I just found this letter from this organization that says that they're concerned about possible municipal bond fraud relating to climate risk and other things associated with these acts of litigation against these gas and oil companies. It's not that they're talking about how in the bond prospectus they represent their understanding one way, and then in the litigation they represent their understanding another way. Well, here's the other question: how many of these municipalities have backed us school events that are sponsored by the same gas and oil companies, or subsidiaries of those gas and oil companies allegedly working in another kind of energy sector that end up financing these back to school events specifically for public schools? August of 2017, anybody? 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 Did anybody track what happens after they do that? Did anybody track what happens after they sponsor an event in a strategic time frame? After that event, there's a huge stock transfer from that company while the city is engaged in whatever it's got going on. I'm just asking because I actually witnessed that and I've been trying to deal with that for years. If you are a municipality and you're inviting the energy sector to participate in any sort of funding or financing or support of back to school events or events during the school year, and those energy sectors, even if they're not gas and oil specifically, but are connected to subsidiaries of these gas and oil companies, then you're being misrepresentative about what you're actually suing for. Because the question of climate change also has to do with, well, what are the priorities around which you would seek to try to engage climate mitigation? And if you're merely trying to get civil charges so you can get a financing for various entities so that you can put it into things like a carbon trust, or that you can invest it in another energy sector without taking responsibility for the criminal responsibilities that go into so-called infrastructure development, then you're going to be on the same side of the table with them in a couple of months.